Well, hello, folks. It's Mike here. I just want to welcome you back to Mr. Cast Iron. And today, Dave Mack and I are going to discuss some of the benefits of being on a carnivore diet that I have experienced and some of the amazing results that have taken place in less than 90 days.
Mike, how did you find Carnivore?
Well, actually, I had some health issues, and so I had a pain in my right side, and I told my wife, I said, there's something going on. I don't know what's going on here. I had actually been working on my house a little bit. I'd crawled under the house in a crawl space and was working underneath the house. And when I crawled back out, I thought maybe I had just rubbed my ribs, on something, a pipe or something coming back out, and didn't think much about it the first day. Well, the next day I got up and it was hurting even more. And I told her, I said, well, I said, Teresa, I'm going to have to do something. I said, there's something going on here. And so I need to try to schedule to get into my doctor. And so I did. And it took probably a day or so before I could get in. And the very next day I was laying on the couch. I was home by myself, and the pain really hit me hard, and I was starting to really freak out because I wasn't sure, if I was having a heart attack or what was going on. And so it really got my attention and really made me nervous because I know that it wasn't a heart attack because the heart's over here on the left side and this was hurting me on the right side. And the first thing I thought was it was something to do with either my liver or pancreas. And the reason why I say that is my oldest brother uh, acquired pancreatic cancer and passed away at age 59. And I was pretty close to 59 at that particular time when this happened. So it really woke me up a little bit. And sad story to that is about 13 or 14 months later, his son, my nephew, also acquired pancreatic cancer and passed away at the age of 38. And so, I knew something was going on. So I talked to my doctor, and he's since retired. He was really a great guy. I really liked him. And I never went to a doctor or a hospital or anything very much all my life. I've been fairly healthy, a little overweight, but I mean, I was fairly healthy. I don't take any medication even today. I take just a magnesium supplement is all I take. But anyway, I got scheduled with him and I went in and told him what was going on. And he said, well, I tell you what, he kind of filled around on me a little bit and touched me and listened to my heart and listened to my lungs and different things. He said, well, I tell you what, Mike, he said, let's schedule an x-ray and go in and see if maybe, because I wasn't sure if I broke a rib or what I did, and he said, let's go in and do some checking. And it kind of caught me off guard. And I said, an x-ray? And he said, yeah, let's do that first. He said, because sometimes, we catch things we're really not looking for. And I thought, he's got something in his mind here. So I thought, okay, well, let's do that. So it was just down the street. We went down. I got the x-ray, come back, and got the results the next morning. And lo and behold, I had a mild case of emphysema and also COPD. And but I didn't have any broken ribs. He told me, he said, your ribs are fine. He said, but one thing for sure, he said, you're definitely having a fatty liver. He said, that's a lot of what the flare up is, causing some of your pain, the intense pain on the right side. And he said, so let's come back in. And he scheduled me a few days later, and I come in and talk to him. And we discussed all kinds of things. And he said, well, I'll tell you what I want you to do first. He said, have you been having any breathing problems, or do you snort? Now, do you wake your wife up? I said, oh yeah, she's always nudging me. And he said, well, you've got some obstruction there. He said, would you be opposed to possibly trying a CPAP, or at least having a test and doing a CPAP? And I said, no, I wouldn't be opposed to that at all. So we scheduled a CPAP, and lo and behold, I was, I wasn't breathing many times during the night. And so he got me set up, and we got a CPAP scheduled, and I went down and tested for that, or not tested, went down and got it fitted for me. And so I started using a CPAP, and of course, at about, I guess I was probably 50, let's see, 61 now. So I was probably 55 years old at that time. And because this has been about 6 years ago, and I told him, I said, Doc, listen, I said, I sleep better now with that CPAP than I ever have in my life. And he said, well, I'll tell you, those pains in your chest, a lot of those will go away. He said, now, as far as the pain in your right side, the fatty liver, he said, we're going to have to talk about possibly diet and exercise and even possibly medication at some point. He said, now, I don't want to do that, which is rare. Most doctors, that's the first thing they want to do, seems like. But he said, let's try some diet and exercise situations, see if we can pull this down. And so that's what we did. And he said, now, I'm going to tell you, he said, I kind of follow the Mediterranean diet, and I didn't know what that was, so I had to do some looking up and see what was really going on there. And he talked about high intensity training. And I said, well, Doc, here's the thing. I said, I'm not a long haul truck driver anymore. For many years, that's what I did. I ran coast to coast here in the United States and even up into Canada. And I said, I don't run long haul anymore. I'm only local here in town. I said, so, it's kind of hard for me to do some of those things, some of the exercise and stuff. But I said, I'll certainly, give it my best shot and do what I can. So I looked into the Mediterranean diet, and in the meantime, while I was looking at things, of course, naturally, the first place you want to go is Google or YouTube. And I got to searching certain things and putting certain keywords in, and some videos started popping up at that time. And I ran across a couple guys. One was a doctor, which everyone's pretty well aware of, Dr. Ken Berry. But I also run into another gentleman, just a regular guy from Tennessee, and his name was Bob Briggs. And the channel at that time, his name was Butter Bob Briggs. And he had a video that was probably his most viewed video that he had, was a pair of humongous pair of blue jeans that he was holding up and showing how much weight he had lost and the size that he was at that time. And the famous line that he used, and I think it may have even been a video title, was "Butter makes your pants fall off." And so that was, that caught my eye, and I thought, well, I'm going to listen to this. And so I got to listening to his videos, and he made a lot of sense. I thought, this is not a normal thing. This is not something that we, have been raised all these years being part of what we call, or is what Ken Berry calls, the standard American diet. And I said, this is it's not common. And so I said, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And I can see the results that he had. And so I ended up watching all of his videos. He only made it was less than 40 videos, I think. And I've watched every one from start to finish. And, I learned a lot of information. And then, of course, naturally was keying into Dr. Berry and a lot of that. As far as from a physician standpoint, I thought, wow, he is bucking the system. He is not, he's not saying what a lot of physicians or hospitals or whatever clinics are saying to do. Most of them are talking about the food pyramid, do this, do that. And he's totally opposite. I said, man, he's swimming upstream. And I said, so there's got to be something to this. And so, he told his story about how he was like 300 pounds or something like that. And he kept trying to help his patients. And, he was trying to tell them to, eat less and exercise more. And he said, here I am, a fat doctor. And how can they, uh, trust me when I'm not in good shape either? And so he started on his own journey trying to figure out how to get in better shape. And lo and behold, he did. He went down the path a lot of us do. You start out paleo or Mediterranean or something like that, and you end up at keto, which that's kind of where I ended up. And so I got into the keto area of dieting. and tried to learn all I could about that and tried to implement that into my life. And so I did and started having some pretty decent results. And so lo and behold, later on, eventually, I ended up in the Carnivore, and that's where we're at today.
So how long have you been with Carnivore now?
Well, now that's another story in and of itself too. I started following Butter Bob Briggs and Ken Berry and gosh, I mean Kelly Hogan. There was Sean Baker. So many different ones. I started really just trying to absorb everything I could. And so I was pretty gung ho for about probably 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, I guess. And that was 2019 that I created this new channel, Mr. Cast Iron. And initially it was called Keto Style. When I first created this channel, the channel name was Keto Style, and I was making keto style type recipes and things like that from what I was learning. And lo and behold, after 2 or 3 years or so, like a lot of people, I fell off the wagon, and I'm one of those people that listen. I'm gonna tell you, this is this is not what you want to do. You don't want to fall off the wagon. And so I had a friend of mine that lived down in Florida, and we were kind of partners in some multi-level marketing things years ago. And so we conversed back and forth quite a bit on the internet and on the phone. Never met each other in person, but anyway, when we were in the multi-level marketing realm, he said, Mike, he said, you need to create a video, get started doing video and push that out so you can attract more, potential customers or whatever. And I said, man, I've never made a video in my life. I said, I'm just a country redneck from Arkansas. I said, I don't even know how to create a video. And he said, well, I'll show you how to do it. So anyway, he taught me how to do video, and I made one, and I thought, well, this is pretty cool. So I could do this. I could sit and talk at a screen and try to reach out people, because my big thing was I wanted to try to help whoever I could with, what I've experienced. Now, whether they choose to do so or not, I thought, well, at least I can share my story kind of like Butter Bob did and Ken Berry was. And so that's kind of how I got into YouTube. And so I was keto style for a good while. One day he called me. He said, he was calling to talk to him, and I couldn't catch the call, and it went to voicemail. But anyway, I picked it up and I listened to the voicemail, and he was always giving me a hard time. We just kind of always just gave each other a hard time, just how guys are. And I said, or he said, Mr. Cast Iron, hey, skillet head, what are you doing? Screening your phone calls now? And that got me tickled. And I thought, that is a cool name, Mr. Cast Iron, because everything I cooked in was cast iron, even during keto. The recipes, if you go back and look at my older videos, I never deleted any of them. I just kept them there. And they're not very good, I'll say that. But anyway, back in 2019, we were cooking a lot of recipes in cast iron. And I thought, that's a cool name. I'm going to look on YouTube and see if anybody has Mr. Cast Iron as a channel name. And if they don't, I'm going to get it. And lo and behold, they didn't. So I immediately changed my name from Keto Style to Mr. Cast Iron, and I went in and looked for domains to see if there was a domain available, MrCastIron.com, and lo and behold, it was. So I bought it and secured that for my website. And so we were off and running. We changed our whole view from Keto Style to Mr. Cast Iron, and I got into that area of cooking and helping people learn how to restore cast iron and season cast iron and different things like that, cooking different recipes. And lo and behold, it veers away from keto. And so I fell off the wagon, and I got to where I was eating, pretty much back on the standard American diet. And it didn't bother me for a while, but after a period of time, I had another issue, and that was about July of this year. So 3 years or so, I was off the wagon of keto and had went carnivore partially. And 3 years we were off, and then I had some problems. We had went to visit my son, had just had a daughter, and we went to visit her. And man, I was so sick, Dave. He said, Mike, he said, I'm about to take you to the emergency room. He said, you look bad. And I said, if I look bad, I said, I can tell you I feel worse than I look then, because I knew my blood pressure was high. I knew my sugar was probably off the charts. Didn't check it or anything, didn't go to the emergency room. I said, we'll just, I said, when I get back to Arkansas, I said, I'll go get this checked out. Well, when I got back to Arkansas, I was feeling better, and I didn't go to the doctor to get checked out. And so we trucked along there for a little while and everything was fine. And then a few months later, I had another episode and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was very similar to the initial hit that I got in my liver. And I knew right then, I thought, yeah, I know what this is. I said, I'm going to make a change today. And I told my wife, I said, we always talk about making changes. One of these days I'm going to change, or one of these days I'm going to lose weight. And, you just got to know what your why is. And my why was I felt like crap. I felt bad. And here I've got a son and a daughter-in-law, two sons and two daughter-in-laws, and two granddaughters. And I said, I've got to make some changes. Nobody else can do that but me. So I'm going to have to make a change, and I'm going to do it today. And so that particular day, I decided to make a change, but I didn't go whole hog into it because I had a wellness um, appointment set up with my now new doctor that was in with the doctor that I initially met with. He retired, and so his partner bought the business, and he's continued to run that. So I just went from one doctor to the next, and so I had a schedule with him to have a wellness done for the company I work for now. And so I went in, and it wasn't good. I mean, I was 271 pounds. I had a BMI of 41.2. And at the particular time that they did my glucose reading, it was 162 that morning. And so he said, we forgot to get your A1C. He said, can you come back in a few days and we'll draw blood again and do your A1C? He said, now, he didn't tell me what it was prior, and I got to looking through my portal, and I seen where it had been 5.7, and then it went to 6.5, but no one said anything about it. And so when I come back in this last time and did the A1C, my A1C was 7.5, and that really shocked me. I thought, wow. So I went to Chat GPT and Google and different things, and I, punched all this in to see what it was. And of course, with a BMI of 41.2, it naturally said, well, you're morbidly obese. And I thought, morbidly obese? I said, man, I feel good. I'm in good shape. I know I'm overweight, but surely to goodness, I'm not morbidly, that's sick. But apparently, I am inside. You may look good on the outside, but you may be dying on the inside. And that was the case. And so when I seen those numbers, it just really floored me. And I thought, I've got to make a change, and I got to get serious about it today. And so July the 19th of this month, I made the change, and I went whole hog carnivore because I was already familiar with it. I knew it was something I could do. I've always loved meat anyway, and I could do without vegetables. But so that's exactly how I got into carnivore. And I went back. That was July. So October of this month, here it is, October the 29th. October the 20th, I went back for my 90-day A1C blood test again. And Dave, I'm here to tell you, I lost 50 pounds in 90 days. I dropped my A1C from 7.5, and it is now currently 5.3. And they dropped my BMI from 41.2 down to 34.9. So I've still got a ways to go on some of that, but my gosh, I feel so much better, man. I mean, I, there's so many things that has happened in that 90 something days. Not not to mention the weight loss. That's just the bonus. That I really wasn't doing this to try to lose weight. I was trying to get my glucose and my blood sugar under control and my A1C. I thought, my gosh, I'm not going to. Well, let me back up and tell you what happened when they called me in with that called that 7.5 A1C. The nurse called me on the phone and said, "We've got your blood back, and I just want to tell you your A1C is high." And I said, "Oh yeah?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what is it?" And she said, "Well, it's 7.5, Mike, and he would like to schedule you to come in and talk to him about possible medical or medication options." And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute." I said, "Isn't an A1C test roughly 90 days at a time?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, okay, well, I'll tell you what, let me take 90 more days and try to change my diet and, my exercise routine and see if I can get that down on my own." She said, "Well, okay, it's hard. And well, good luck, and we'll see you in 90 days. And so I come back 90 days later, and he was floored. He said, "Wow, Mike," he said, "I'm impressed." He said, "You look good, man." He said, "What have you been doing?" And I didn't want to tell him I was carnivore. Didn't want to tell him I went ketovore, because a lot of these doctors, that's the first thing they just kind of go off when you say something like that. And I said, "Well, I'll tell you, Doc," I said, "I just really have been on an elimination diet." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, I've eliminated all kinds of seed oils. I've eliminated all kinds of food, packaged foods and boxed foods and stuff like that, processed foods and seed oils and just different things." And I said, "We've been trying to eat better and exercise." I said, "I've been fasting a little bit, intermittent fasting and things like that." And I said, "I've actually kind of started walking a little bit too." And he said, "Man," he said, he said, "You're exactly what we try to tell everybody to do." He said, "You're doing great, man." He said, "Just keep doing what you're doing." He said, "I don't even want to see you again for another 6 months." He said, "You don't have to come back in 3 months." And so I really felt good that day. I left that place. I was walking on cloud nine, and I thought, well, good deal. Thank you, Lord. I feel so much better. And, but there's just so many things that I could list and tell you, that has changed for me, that I really, some things I really didn't even think was a problem or noticed until it was actually gone. And I can tell you a few of those if you'd like for me to.
Sure.
Um, you know, I mentioned the weight loss. That's just a bonus. That was something that I really wasn't trying to do so much as was get the blood sugar down, which I did with the A1C. And the glucose reading was 90, I think it was 90, 91 or 92 the day they did. I had them do a fasted insulin and a fasting glucose and lipid panels. I wanted to know what everything was going on, and metabolic panel. I couldn't get the lipid panel to tell my cholesterol and stuff like that because it had been less than 6 months, so they wouldn't do that. But I had all the other tests, and man, they looked awesome. And but some of the benefits that I have received out of this just in this short period of time, the inflammation was a big thing. Being a long haul truck driver, of course, you sit in a seat all day long and you're gripping a steering wheel like this and, a gear shift or whatever. And you're constantly stressed watching traffic and watching everything and holding, 80,000 pound behind you and different stuff like that. So you're always under stress. And so inflammation was a big thing that I thought was actually arthritis. And of course, I've had hip pains forever, but from sitting in a seat like that all the time, bouncing around and, bouncing around these rough old highways in the United States, beating you to death. And so I've always had hip pain, and I'd only sleep 4 or 5 hours a night because my hips would go to hurting and I'd wake up. Well, I noticed the inflammation was gone. My fingers would lock up sometimes when I'd try to grip something, and I noticed that was all gone. I have grip like I was a 20-year-old again, a good strong grip. And my fingers don't lock up or anything, and I don't have any joint pain anywhere. And in my hips, I don't have any hip pain at all. So it really wasn't arthritis, it was just inflammation. And so that increased my sleep. I had remained on the sleep apnea or the CPAP. But what had happened over a period of time after losing 50 pounds, of course, you lose that neck fat and everything. I got to where I didn't even need the CPAP. So I quit wearing it a little bit, and I'd ask my wife every morning, I said, "Teresa, did I snore last night? Did I wake you up or anything? She said, no, I didn't hear you at all. And I said, well, you nudge me and wake me up anytime I do. I said, I'm going to test this and see. I'm not going to use my CPAP anymore just to see. And lo and behold, I haven't used that CPAP since. And so that was another big thing for me. And it was big enough just to get used to wearing the crazy thing, initially. I certainly didn't want to do it the rest of my life. But another thing, too, that I really noticed was being lethargic, not having any energy. That all went away. I have plenty of energy, sleep well at night, get plenty of rest, wake up the next day with plenty of energy. But another thing too, Dave, was clear headedness. When you have brain fog and you can't focus, you can't make good decisions and things like that. It's hard on you and it's aggravating because you just can't seem to make something happen that you may be working on or thinking about. And so all of that went away, and so I'm clear-headed, clear-focused, and I'm able to concentrate. I'm involved when I'm involved, so to speak. But let me just think of some other stuff. There was basically no hunger. I mean, I eat, and I eat a lot. I'm a pretty good sized boy, and I've always loved to eat. And so when I eat plenty until I'm full, and then I quit. I don't eat anymore. And initially, I had started out as carnivore. I was trying to do some elimination, and so I was having to eat quite a bit to compensate for the standard way of eating before. And so I was eating quite a bit, and I got to where I was narrowing it down. I was not only eliminating the things that I was eating, but I was also eliminating the amount of time that I was eating in. In other words, I went to intermittent fasting, and I dropped from I think I initially started 16.8 at first for a week or so, and then I dropped down to 18.6, and then as time progressed, I moved into OMAD, or 1 meal a day, and I basically eat in about a 30-minute to 1 hour time period, 23 hours fasting, eat one time. And initially, when I started this, I was not exercising at all. I was just trying to focus on getting this pain out of my side and eating better. And so once that started taking effect, and it wasn't easy. Now, I didn't have keto flu, a lot of people talk about, because I knew, after having done this once before, I kind of knew what I needed to do to get into this. And so I was making sure, I was loaded up on my electrolytes, my Redmond real salt, and my potassium, and my magnesium. And that's the only pills I take is magnesium. I don't take anything else. And so as I kept doing that. I wasn't having keto flu, but my gosh, man, the elimination, if you can understand what I'm saying, I was eliminating a lot, and we have that problem. And but after about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, that cleared up, and I don't have that problem anymore. Matter of fact, I don't have any gas. I can say this, I don't fart or anything like that anymore. I don't belch or don't burp. Don't have any indigestion. I used to have indigestion and belch and burp. And I don't know if that was just the vegetables or what it was, but anyway, that's all gone. And but the hunger, I thought, I don't really get all that hungry. And so as I implemented the intermittent fasting, I've always kind of fasted probably since I was about 21 years old, occasionally, not all the time, but it wasn't something new to me. So I knew it was something that I could do. And, even after doing OMAD 1 meal a day, pretty regular now, I've done several 36-hour fast and even 72-hour fast, and without any problem. I mean, the first day you're kind of, a little bit hungry, but if you just drink a little water or a little salt water or whatever, solely water, you'll be fine and you can move on. The second day, you don't feel as hungry. And the third day, I mean, it's like, I'm not even hungry. I could probably fast 5 days, but I haven't ever ventured out into 5 days. I've only done 3. And so, as I think about that, another thing too that really amazed me that I've noticed that went away was when I would take a shower and I'd get out of the shower and I was drying off. I would take a Q-tip and I would always clean my ears. And I've always had a pretty good little bit of wax come out. I don't have any earwax when I clean my ears. My Q-tips are nearly completely clean. There may be just a little small hint, but there's very little. And I thought that is really odd. I wonder why that is. I don't know. But anyway, it's just another one of those things that I never dreamed possible that would, possibly happen by going carnivore. And
Mm.
so,
I think all these little things, whether it's the earwax or it's the not farting, or when you do farts, being for the first time in your life, you can trust a fart kind of thing.
yeah,
It's like all these little things that you kind of put them together and you go, this is the way we were meant to eat.
yeah,
If everything starts getting better, that's a good sign that we're eating in the right way. Because like if you've got a family pet and they're sick, they've got all these stomach problems and whatever, and you change their diet to something new, and suddenly all those problems go away. You go, oh, it was the diet. That's all it was.
right.
So
Yeah,
it feels like it should be the same with us. If all the problems go away, it's probably the diet.
exactly.
Mm.
And that's the thing. Uh, that really got me when they were calling me about my results. I didn't get a call and say, "Hey, listen, we would like to schedule you to come in and let's talk about, your diet or let's talk about some exercise." When I got the call, it was, "Hey, your A1C is high. It's 7.5. And so we would like to get you to come in, schedule you to come in to talk to you about some type of medication options." And I thought, I told Teresa, I told my wife, I said, "Look, I ate my way into this condition and I'm going to eat my way out of it." And so I knew it was bad diet, like you said. And you're exactly right. And so that's exactly what my goal was. And I was laser focused. I thought, when I get involved in something, I'm committed, and I was committed to this. I said I'm going to change because I'm not going on any medication. I don't want any metformin. I don't want to take any kind of uh, Monjaro or Ozempic or anything like that, and I certainly don't want any kind of gastric bypass or something kind of surgery like that. I said, so I know I've eaten my way into this position, and so I'm going to, Lord willing, eat my way out of it. And that's what I've done. And I'm going to continue to do so because this is my second go round. As I said earlier, I fell off the wagon. So I feel like I've got a second chance, and I don't want to try to test to have a third, if you know what I'm saying.
Um, so how have I mean, since July 19, this is pretty big results that you've had. Like, what kind of reactions have you had from your family?
Well, I mean, it's been mixed. My wife, of course, she's here with me day in and day out, and she's always so proud of me and tells me, "Man," he said, I wished I had the willpower and motivation that you do. And matter of fact, you've inspired me to do better." My wife is a bad type 2 diabetic, and she is on Mounjaro. And so she's got neuropathy real bad. But she doesn't really care for meat that much and never has. And so I've been trying to softly and lightly encourage her to get back into keto. I don't want to cause any World War III at the house, because that happens sometimes when your spouse is not on board or a family member. And so, the big thing with other people, like a lot of people I work with, they've just sat back and watched, and they thought, wow. And without saying much to any of them, I've noticed some of them in this 90 days or almost 120 days, I guess. I've noticed several of them starting to eat better and eliminate some things without me even saying much. They knew what I was doing. They would ask questions. And so I would just tell my story a little bit of what I was doing. And they watch me every day because when in our slow period, we can cook in our kitchen at work and work with several guys. There's only one or two women there. And all of us guys out there, most of us are hunters and most of us are cooks. So someone's cooking all the time. And so as far as uh, you know, my encouragement to them was, I said, I've eliminated a lot of this stuff, so I can't, if you're going to cook a pork steak, cook mine naked. I don't want any sauces or seasoning or anything like that. Just cook it naked and I'll be good to go. So, but yeah, another thing too, I failed to mention earlier, Dave, was a couple things I noticed too was my blood pressure was regulated. And I've always kind of been on the high side a little bit, especially with the stress of driving and whatnot. But my blood pressure regulated, and also now my sugar has regulated. And being dropping down to 5.3, of course, 5.6 or 5.7 is basically the baseline of what they consider prediabetes. And so I've fallen below that, and I intend to stay that way.
That's awesome. And so you're still driving trucks?
I am locally. I don't go out of state anymore. Well, I live in Northeast Arkansas and Southeast Missouri. I was born and raised in a little town in Southeast Missouri, down in what's called the Boot Hill, little town called Kennett, Missouri. And it's, I guess, in a sense, famously known for someone you'll probably know. I actually went to high school with her, and that's Cheryl Crow. And so we've got several people in our little town there that actually have made it pretty good in the music industry, just besides Cheryl. And but when I moved back from Texas years ago, driving a truck, I lived down in Dallas for many, many years. And when I moved back home to be closer to my mom and dad in their later years, and they've both since passed on, I just stayed here in Northeast Arkansas where they were at. And I have a sister here in town, sister and brother in law, and a nephew. And I actually work with my nephew. He's actually my boss out there, but uh, so he had got me, talked me into coming off the road and going to work and driving for them. And so I just work locally here. We only run, we may run 80 to 120-mile radius of the office, and that's it. And we don't even do that very often. I'm in the farming industry, and sad to say, we're the guys that fertilize farms, fertilize fields, corn and wheat and beans and rice and stuff like that. And so our peak season is anywhere from March till about July or August. And then we have a slow period until the fall fertilizer when they get the crops out of the field. Sometimes we'll fertilize in the fall, just maybe a month and a half, and that's it. And the rest of the time, we're either working on equipment or we're cooking all the time, or we're working on something. And so,
Yeah. So when you are driving, um, I mean, have you done a lot of driving since you've been on Carnivore this time?
no, well,
Right.
no, not at all. No.
Yeah. So I wonder, it'll be interesting once you start driving again, like if you find it kind of easier, less stressful, that kind of thing.
Well, I haven't done a lot, but I have done some. And, the lack of hunger, I don't worry about, well, where am I going to get something to eat? I always carried a lunchbox anyway, brought my food, even before carnivore. And so, uh, since carnivore, I mean, I would take what I was going to eat. I eat at 11 o'clock every morning, and I don't eat again until 11 o'clock the next day. So, I've noticed, I don't have the hunger, so I can go all day long without worrying about food, having to stop and get something else in case I run out and worrying about that. But I don't fear that at all.
Oh, that's nice. So, as you mentioned before, this is it for you. You're going to stay eating this way going forward.
Well, I intend to, and I failed to finish the question you asked earlier. How does everybody take this? Of course, my wife is real encouraging and supportive. And a lot of the people out at work are too. But now I do have some family members that say, well, what about your cholesterol? And then I had one family member say, well, you might get scurvy or something like that. Just all the normal things that you hear about going carnivore. And of course, none of those things are going to happen. Your cholesterol. We need that. We need that for brain power. And I often look back and think, about my dad, because my dad was a POW of the Second World War. I'm the baby of the family, so I was a youngster growing up out of an old family, and he was shell shocked. He was in the European theater, and he got shell shocked real bad, and of course he had PTSD most of his life, and so growing up he had quite a bit of problems. And in his later life, that's why when I moved out of Texas, moved back home, I initially sold my truck. I owned several trucks over the years of my own, and I actually sold out and moved back home to be closer to mom and daddy. And he had developed dementia. And I've often wondered, of course, we know now, we hear it all the time, that uh, Alzheimer's and dementia is basically called now type 3 diabetes, which is a form of inflammation of the brain. And he suffered with that until he finally died of dementia. And I often wonder, I thought, um, if daddy had a way of eating like we're eating now, we did growing up and at home. We raised hogs, raised chickens, had good food, but I mean, a lot of your vegetable oils and Crisco and all that other kind of crap started coming into play back in the 60s. And of course, I grew up in 64, or was born in 64. So I was on the tail end of that, or actually the beginning end of that. And so, I often wonder if daddy was able to never get onto that and just continue to eat lard, because we had rendered lard from hogs. I've helped him do that, and we would make lye soap and out of the pork lard. And I often wondered, with the chickens and chicken fat, and we always ate the skin, but Mama always fried it, in a cast iron skillet, and it would be breaded. Of course, flour and stuff's really not good. But I just often wonder if either one of those, if they were able to eat the proper human diet, as Dr. Ken Berry talks about, I wonder if he would have not ever acquired dementia. But who knows?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that doctors should be more aware of. And as people develop conditions like whether it's type 2 diabetes or they start to show signs of dementia or something, doctors should be saying, we need to think about what they're eating.
I
And
think I think you're absolutely right. I think that I think your average person, unless they have an episode like I did, or they have some kind of uh, health scare or physical scare, really don't consider that much of what's going on inside of them and what you ingest and what really takes place. I actually had a conversation on a comment of a post on Facebook today with the person here in town, because I'm always posting some kind of little old something, just trying to bring awareness to some things. And I mentioned that. I said, she said, well, people's had dementia, all healthy people's had dementia for many, many years. And I said, yeah, that's true. But my dad died of dementia. And I said, even though, you may seem fine on the outside, you may look good on the outside, but you may be sick on the inside. I said, it's kind of like your pickup truck or your car. It may look real good on the outside, but it may have rust underneath, and it's deteriorating from the inside out. And I said, so I just wonder, even though they may seem to have eaten good according to, the standards of today, and it may not be doing us any good. It's probably, doing more harm. And we know, you and I both know, and anyone that's on keto or carnivore knows that, it's really not good from the inside out.
yeah, definitely. I think one of the big problems these days is we've allowed ourselves to be in the position where we've made doctors' jobs really easy. because we've allowed ourselves to be kind of educated and indoctrinated into this way of thinking there's a pill for every ill. So when we go to the doctor, carnivores are the exception typically, but when we go to the doctor, we're kind of feeling like it's almost like if we leave without medication for whatever complaint we have, then we feel like we've missed out, or the doctor should be able to shut off the problem with some prescription.
Well, and if that prescription doesn't work, we've got three more to go with that for the side effects of the one we just prescribed to you. And that's the crazy thing about it. They're not really, for whatever reason. I mean, who knows what the underlying reason behind all of this, unless it's greed and money and stuff like that. I mean, let's just be real about it. That's probably the truth of the matter. Big pharma, big ag, uh, you know, big food and stuff like that, they're not interested in your health. And so pharmacy for sure, if they prescribe something that would heal your problem, then they're going to lose a customer. And that's just the truth. Let's just be real about it. And so if we prescribe something that is going to kind of deal with some of the symptoms, but it doesn't heal the root cause, then we've got a customer for life. And if those symptoms get out of proportion, and you have some side effects to this medication, well, I tell you what, let's try this. And I live this life because I've been with my wife to so many doctor's appointments for her neuropathy, and we're basically down to where they said there's nothing else we can do for you. And I mean, we've been through everything that you can imagine, and her it's just inflammation. It's an inflamed body has caused that. The nerve endings are just burn out basically, and that's what causes neuropathy. And it's from high glucose. It's from sugar, and she's been a diabetic over 20 years. So, the it just blows my mind, that they're not looking for the root cause to heal somebody. It's more or less like they're not healers, they're drug dealers.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think, one point that really illustrates something you said there is like they're not worried about our health. That's I think the clearest example of the fact they're not worried about our health is big food. So it's a free market. They're free to produce any products they want, right? So they're producing all these kind of breakfast cereals with all sorts of stuff you can't pronounce in there, so that you're gonna want to eat it more, and putting all the colorings in and whatever. That's fine, but the fact they don't care about your health is exemplified by the fact that on those boxes they put health claims.
Yes.
If they were being honest and they just wanted to sell a product, they wouldn't put the health claims on the box, right?
Yeah.
But it's that's really, I think, one of the clearest examples. But it's good to hear how well you're doing, and in such a short period of time. Um, if someone came to you and said, okay, look, I've seen how well you've done in this 90, 120 days, Mike. Tell me what to do. I'm going to give this a try. What advice or tips would you give them?
Well, I actually had a nephew call a few nights ago, and he had seen a post I'd put on Facebook where basically, I'd reversed from 7.5 to 5.3, and I listed a bunch of the other things that was in my um, portal, telling the numbers for all the other stuff that they tested for. And he said, "Wow," he said that's crazy. He said, I need to do that. He said, "I'm now up to a 4X shirt." And he said, "I need to lose some weight." And I know I do. He said, "Now I had a physical. My doctor said I was fine." I said, "Well," I said, "You know me, I'm just going to be plain about this." I said, "But when you got a belly like I've got and like you've got, you're not fine." I said, you're insulin resistant. And I said, you're having troubles on the inside. Now, you may not have been diagnosed yet as a diabetic, but I said, you're well on your way. I said, you need to get this under control. And he's only 30 years old. I said, you're going to have to get this under control or you're going to have some problems. And he cut me off and we were talking about something else because I was getting ready to say, if you don't get this straightened up soon, you're going to end up having a stroke or a heart attack. Not to mention diabetes. I said, you need to get this under control. So, to tell someone you got to be truthful about it. Don't beat around the bush. They either will or they won't. Some will, some won't. Some people are just tire kickers. They just want to know what's going on. They're not interested in changing anything. They just want to kick some tires, like they're at a used car lot or something. But when they see the results that you have and they see what you're doing, I mean, you're going to have a lot of people that will reach out to you that wouldn't normally say much on Facebook or say much on a YouTube video. I mean, I make videos and we're getting ready to crank up. Let me talk about my YouTube channel for just a minute, if you don't mind. What happened during this time, I was doing a video of seasoning a cast iron skillet, and I had always used Crisco. All right, Crisco is nothing but a vegetable oil made from cottonseed oil and soybean and oil and stuff like that. But I will be honest about it; it does make a very good finish on cast iron. And so I made a video about this, and Dave, I got so much flack from the YouTube community, not so much from my followers and subscribers, which those are great people, but viewers, which is different. You know the difference between viewers and subscribers. And man, I mean, they were about to hang me from a tree. Said I wouldn't use that crap. You don't need to be telling people you're liable to kill people, telling them to use Crisco and everything. And man, I mean, it really shocked me. I thought, my gosh, I said, all I'm trying to do is help people. I certainly don't want to hurt anybody. And so it put me in a pause, and I quit making videos for almost 10 months before I finally made another one because I thought, wow, something's going on. Well, in the meantime, that was December of this past year. And then July come along, and that's when I had this episode. And so it was really a godsend that I took a pause. This happened, and so I made a change. So I come back. One of my first videos was why I no longer use this right here. So I kind of cleared it up about why I don't suggest or recommend using Crisco anymore, unless you want to. That's your choice, your business. But here's the reason why I don't, and it's for health reasons. And so, we got kind of started. We've made it 2 or 3, maybe 4 videos since. I've been on Tom Garvey. I know you interviewed Tom not long ago, the keto cook, and Tom and I have known each other for several years. And he interviewed me a little while back too, and we were on a live last night together. And but anyway, he's been after me. He said, "Man, you got to get back to making videos," and I'm going to. But they're going to be more keto, carnivore type things along with cast iron. I mean, I'm going to, be making, how to continue to clean and how to do things with lard, tallow. Tallow is my favorite. It has been for a long time now, but, lard and tallow and bacon grease is another one of my favorites. And how to cook certain things in those and still try to maintain, the keto carnivore way of eating.
So how can we find you on YouTube?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find, actually. If you'll just type in Mr. Cast Iron, you're going to find me on YouTube. You'll find my website. You'll find me on Instagram. I'm not very active on Instagram at all. I never really understood it much, so I never got involved in that. I do have a TikTok, but I'm not very involved in that either. I was making some videos from time to time on Amazon, so you may find me even attached to Amazon, but primarily I'm YouTube, and I have been. I love this community. I've been involved with YouTube probably since about 2007, 2008, and really active with it when I created this channel in 2019. And up until, like I said, a few months ago, it just threw me in a tailspin, and I had to back up and rethink. I thought, I don't want to steer anybody wrong. That's not what I want to do. I want to be a person to try to help someone, and that was the sole purpose of having this channel. And so I had to back up and think, well, if they're not happy with that, I've got to try to figure out how to, you know, blend these two together as far as this way of eating, but yet with cast iron, because my followers are following me and my subscribers are following me because of cast iron. So,
Nice. So I'll link to your channel and your other socials and your website in the show notes. Mike, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
well, Dave, I certainly appreciate you reaching out to me. And, if we can ever do anything for you at any time, just reach out. You got my information, and I'll be glad to help you any way I can, brother.